I only came to a conclusion about Hogwarts Legacy after playing Resident Evil 4 Remake. Now, that might seem like a strange comparison, so allow me to explain. RE4 Remake plays to its strengths and is tense and engaging throughout its entire runtime. Hogwarts Legacy is passively fun, and while it's certainly one of the most competent Harry Potter games, it's completely overstuffed with content and tries to do too many things at once, which degrades the overall experience. So basically what this game is an open world Harry Potter game. You start off as a 5th year student coming to Hogwarts for the first time, which in and of itself is unusual, and you've also got some mysterious powers that bring trouble your way throughout the main story. I think the main story is pretty good, actually. It's very similar to a traditional Harry Potter story, so much so that a lot of scenes in the game actually come from the movies. So it's very kind of fan servicey. There's basically everything you would expect out of a Harry Potter game. Maybe a bit too much so. It's a little safe in my opinion, but you know, it gets the job done, and the main quest is by far a lot more entertaining than the side quest, which we'll get into soon. So in terms of the open world, the Hogwarts castle is the main point of interest in this game, and that is really lovingly crafted. There's a lot of different secrets to discover, and it feels really magical exploring the castle grounds. You've also got the main town of Hogsmeade, which isn't too big, but it's got enough shops and sites for you to explore. And then on top of that, you've also got a number of other villages and settlements that kind of blend into each other, that there's really too many of them, and the rest of the open world feels very empty actually. There's quite a lot of like filler stuff you can do, like camps and dungeons and all this stuff, but there's not a lot of curated content or like organic things you discover that might lead to a quest, or you know, special encounters or moments that make the game feel really lived in. Unfortunately, a lot of the side quests are given to you by people in villages, in towns, and they're very generic. It's kind of like, go here, kill this, get this thing for me. With that said, a lot of the objectives are unique in and of themselves, but at the same time, it does mainly boil down to fetch quests, with the exception of the relationship side quests. And I say relationship, you don't actually get into relationships in this game. There are dialogue options, but they're very limited, and a few times actually I selected a dialogue option and then the response was like totally opposite to what it should have been, which was weird. But anyway, these relationship side quests are a bit more in depth, and I think there should have been more of them and less of the fetch side quests. So the relationship side quests basically have you helping a fellow student, and it's kind of like an overarching little sub quest that'll lead to a conclusion. And I thought these were mostly pretty good. It seemed a bit more high budget than the rest of the side quests, and there was a bit more personality in them as well. There's also a bunch of these little puzzle type things called Trials of Merlin, and these have you basically just kind of using your spells to manipulate physics and put things in certain areas, or pop little heads and ignite torches. Really simple things. It feels like there's just way too many of these. There must be like 70 in the map, and there is an incentive to doing them, because if you do a certain number of them, you unlock more additional inventory slots for like gear and stuff, which is really limited. So throughout this game, you'll be collecting a lot of loot, a lot of different loot for your hat and chest and head and whatever else, and these slots fill up really fast, like way too fast. So you sort of need to do these Trials of Merlin to have any sort of increased inventory. The weird thing is, after a while, you actually just stop getting rewarded for doing the trials. So eventually you'll just stop unlocking additional inventory slots, which is weird. I mean, because once I had unlocked all the slots, it was like, well, what's the point of doing these? There's really, other than an achievement, well, like, what's the point of continuing to do these? They're not that unique. There's only, like, I counted 9 different scenarios or like, variations of puzzles, and that might seem like actually a fair amount, but when you look at how many there are on the map, which is, like, about, from my count, a rough estimate, 70, it slowly becomes quite tedious doing them. But, you know, I guess they give you some incentive to begin with, so that's something. This game definitely is not without its incentives. There's a bunch of different, they're called field guides. That's what you'll be using Revelio for, which reveals like hidden objects and stuff. And so once you find a field guide, you'll unlock a little piece of history, and that'll give you XP, and that'll count towards your overall completion rate of the game. You'll also unlock various things in combat, which will give you additional cosmetic items, and then, you know, you've got the Merlin Trials, which give you additional inventory slots, and then flying on your broomstick, you'll find these balloons in the sky. If you pop a lot of them, you unlock a new broomstick. So you're always getting something, which I really appreciate in this game. I guess my problem problem with the rewards is especially like with the loot is, again, there's just too much of it. So a lot of the times the loot that you find for exploring in like a dungeon will often be under your level. So it will sort of be worthless for you to actually explore those dungeons because it's like, well, you've already got something better than that on you. The only thing that they really kind of give you in that instance is just the cosmetic look of an item. So you might get like a wizard hat or something, a different type of look that you can transmog what your character's wearing and put that on as a transmog. The thing with the transmog is that you have to do it every time you select a new piece of gear. So there's no like set you can save, like you want your goofy Zonko's outfit set saved as a preset outfit. You can't do that. Every time you get a new piece of gear, you have to transmog it to the item that you actually want to be wearing, which was really tedious throughout the game considering there's so much loot. Another thing that's quite annoying when you sell the loot is there's no sell all button. You can't highlight a bunch of items that you want and just sell them all. You have to sell each and every one individually, and that can take a really long time when you have like 20 plus items in your inventory slot and you've got to sell them all individually. So we've covered the open world and we've covered the loot you get from the open world. What about exploration? What about movement? How does that feel? It feels okay. I mean, it's mainly you walking around until you get your broomstick, and then you're really flying. Then you've got some cool flying moves, and it becomes really cool, actually, zipping around on your broomstick. And also, you can upgrade your broomstick by doing these time trials. So, kind of just, beating this ghost. So, yeah, there's no Quidditch in this game, which has been, quite a lot of people are very upset about that. But good news is Warner Brothers has announced a Quidditch game, and that's going to be really great because you got to pay more money for it. Something to note is that this game is set before Harry Potter in the 1800s, but I never felt a sense of place regarding that time setting aside from the ability to wear numerous top hats, which I did faithfully throughout the game, and was quite disappointed to see not a lot of people in top hats and tailcoats and all of that good things, and no one, as far as I could remember, was wearing a monocle, which is, I mean, how can you set something in the 1800s and no one's wearing a monocle? I mean, maybe a goblin was wearing a monocle. I'm not sure on that. I would have to leave it to the experts on Reddit. Also, I forgot to mention you do get a hippogriff later on, but it's not as efficient as just using your broomstick. And you also get another big boy later on to ride, but again, didn't really use those too much. Okay, so on my travels through Hogwarts, I kept finding these locked doors, and I thought, okay, at some point we're going to learn the spell Alohomora, which unlocks doors. And we do end up learning that from a really weird groundskeeper called Mr. Moon. And Mr. Moon you're tasked with finding these little statues that can only be found at night. And if you find enough of them, he'll give you an additional upgraded spell that allows you to open up even more doors. Now, I really thought this game would just let you tap the door and it would be unlocked. But for some strange reason, this game, and it's a common theme with this game, adds more complexity to things than needed. So we've got the obligatory lockpick mechanic, which again is very strange because Alohomora just unlocks things. There's no lock-picking guide to using the spell. It doesn't actually make sense in the universe, and the lock-picking mechanic itself for me took quite a little bit of time to work out. It was very fiddly, and I could never get the two dials to line up exactly and have them held there for long enough to unlock the door. I'd always kind of have it there and then it would kind of come off, and it was this game doesn't even need a lock-picking mechanic, okay? Just unlock the door. It's not that hard, dude. It doesn't need to be in there. There's no need for it to be in there. Okay, another whole feature of this game is the room of requirement. Now, this room serves as kind of like your base, like your hub base where you can set up potion stands and plant seeds and stuff, and the amount of customization is crazy in the room of requirement, and it honestly borders on excessive. So you can change the walls in the room. You've got spells that can summon things or delete things or transmog things and change their dimensions and the way they look, and you can also change the lighting. And then you've also got a beast pen within the room of requirement, and you've got all this stuff here, and I don't think a lot of players are going to spend more than 20 minutes total on the room of requirement, and it feels like they've spent months and months and months allowing for this level of customization that I feel was just not needed in this game. So another thing that I mentioned is the beast taming mechanic. So you unlock this after getting the Room of Requirement, and often in your travels in the open world, you'll see these beast dens. And at first I thought these were like things that you would go and kill the beasts in them, but when I would walk through them, the beasts would be passive. They wouldn't attack you. I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. And then later you get a little magic pouch that can actually capture beasts, and then you can send them to your beast den, and then you've got like spells. Yeah, I guess there's spells that feed the beasts and then pet the beasts, and then the beasts give you this material that you can use to upgrade your armor and stuff. But it's just like, wow, this system again would have taken so long to implement, and I just don't think, I mean, it's not even really required in the story, I think, aside from like one mission, but it's like this whole entire sub mechanic of the game, and it's like, dude, why? But why? Does this game really need beast taming mechanic? I just don't think it does. But then of course there's going to be that 2 people out of 5,000 that's like, I devoted my life to beast mechanic taming and I found it really enjoyable, and I raised these beasts and I had all these baby beasts and I sold them for a massive profit and actually increased my enjoyment of the game by 50%. You've also got stealth in this game, which you kind of need to do a few points during the main quest, and it doesn't feel great. It seems like enemies just spot you immediately, and there's like nothing you can do. There's no like MGS5 double take, you get like a second to react or like to like hide back in the shadows or something. When you get spotted, it's like, oh, I've seen you now. Come out with your hands up. There's nothing you can do, and it feels way too short of a time to actually get spotted. And even though you have a spell that kind of makes you semi-invisible, it really doesn't make you invisible. Like, you actually cannot like stand in front of an enemy at all. They'll just spot you right away. And yeah, overall I think the stealth is not super great. With that said, it does feel pretty nice if you can get in close behind an enemy, because then you can do an insta-kill Petrificus Totalis, which is kind of cool. Okay, one other thing I'll say before we start talking about the combat is that the main missions, I said before, the main missions are pretty enjoyable, and they are. But some weird thing about the way mission structure is designed in Hogwarts Legacy is that if you leave the main mission objective or the person that you're meant to be following, if you leave like more than a couple meters away from that person, you'll get this like big red writing come across the screen that's telling you you are abandoning the mission objective, and it's got like a countdown. It's going to like count you down, count you out, and basically game over like if you don't comply. And I just thought that was so weird. Like, I haven't seen that since like PS2 era game design. I just couldn't, especially in an open world game, I just like would be like, I don't know, collecting some kind of resource or something close by to the mission objective, and then I get this big red writing across the screen telling me like, you better get in line, fool, and get back to the mission objective. I was like, what? Could not believe that was in here. I don't know why, honestly. Okay, we're going to talk about the combat, but before I do that, I just want to mention how great I think the non-combat spells are. I think it's really cool walking around Hogwarts and using Lumos to light up a mirror that shows you a secret, or using Confringo to burn away some hedges that are in your way. I think that stuff is really cool, and it's nice just to use those non-combat spells through exploration, and just having them on hand really makes you feel like a wizard. So props to them for the implementation of those spells. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the combat. This was my biggest concern going into Hogwarts Legacy, because there's never really been a Harry Potter game that has nailed spell combat. I think it's very difficult to do because it's not the traditional shooting combat that so many games use. It's a combat mechanic that basically has to be built from the ground up, and that's why it's so hard to nail. I can faithfully report to you that the combat is decent. I wouldn't say it's excellent, but I wouldn't say it's bad either. It works, and it's actually got quite a lot in common with the developer's previous game, Mad Max. I know that might sound weird because Mad Max is not a wizard, but he has a combat parry type of kind of like an Arkham type of thing where, if someone's about to hit you, there's a big little thing that goes over your head. And that's the same here. So when anyone's gonna throw something at you or shoot a spell at you, you'll get a window of opportunity to parry and block the spell. And if you block it just right, you'll parry it and actually do some damage and stun the enemy back, which it took me a while to actually get the flow of that. And I think the parry window is a little short for my liking. But once I got it down, I was flinging spells left and right. I was stupefying. I was going crazy. Do you know what I mean? It felt really good, that basic mechanic. And another additional benefit of not just blocking but then doing the parry is that if you do a perfect parry, it breaks the enemy's shield. So you'll encounter a lot of enemies that have these shields, and it's kind of color-coded to the spell that you need to break that shield. So you have red spells, yellow spells, purple spells, and you also have green spells, but these are very naughty spells that you should not be using because they're unforgivable curses. But the game really doesn't reprimand you for using these at all, which is very strange. Some enemy attacks are unparryable, and that will just mean a red icon will come up over your head instead of a yellow icon, and that means you just need to dodge the hell out of the way. So you've got all these spells, and the way that you use them is through your quick slots. So you've got 4 of these quick slots that you can switch between during combat or whenever you want. I found it quite difficult switching between combat because I tended to get overwhelmed. So it's good to have one spell for each color on your quick slot at any one time. You've only got 4 quick slots, and they each have 4 spell slots. Now you actually have 23 spells in total in the game. So you've got more spells that you can actually use in the quick slots, which, I guess is a bit of a shame, but I can't really think of another way to implement using all these spells at once, other than maybe if they gave you even more quick slots, that might have been a good idea. But so anyway, these combat spells are on a cooldown, and in between using these, to do a basic attack, you will be pulling down right trigger. Now, this is your basic spell that isn't on a cooldown. You can use it whenever you want. It does very, very low damage. So low that it almost becomes laughable, especially when you're versing a strong enemy. The basic spell just does no damage. I really wish that it did a bit more damage. I mean, I was getting fatigue in my hand from mashing the right trigger constantly, it's too much, man. A way that they mitigate that is by using spell combos. So if you use one of your color spells and then use a basic spell, it will do more damage. So that's definitely a way that it can help the low damage output of your basic spell, but even with that combo, damage is still quite low. Okay, so those are my thoughts on Hogwarts Legacy. I overall enjoyed this game. I think it could use with a trimming down and a refining of some of its features. One last thing I'll say is that it does feel weird in this game to be playing as a student who can go out whenever they want, go into the Forbidden Forest, use unforgivable curses, basically kill poachers and bandits, and no one really says anything. I was reading recently that apparently this game did have a morality system in it, but then it was cut during development. And thinking about it, it actually makes a lot of sense for there to be a morality system. And I think if they do a sequel, that should be something they look at doing, because it would just make more sense. It would give the player a bit more agency. If they want to be like a dark wizard and they choose to use unforgivable curses, maybe people look at you differently and things like that. You might affect your outcome at school, and you might actually unlock different quests depending on your moral alignment and how good you are. I think that could be really interesting, and it might actually elevate the game and give it even more, personality and charm. So yeah, I mean, this game sold very well, so I think we will be seeing a sequel. What did you think about the game? Would you like to see a sequel? Let me know.